Mom's hurt. Please help her. Her tiny frame trembled as her words cracked, raw with terror. My mom's dying and you're all just walking by like she's trash, she shrieked at a man in a suit who pretended not to hear. Are you that busy? Is she not good enough for you? The man flinched, then walked faster. Anna's mother, a woman in her mid-30s named Leticia, lay crumpled beside a fallen bicycle. A dark red smear trailed from her forehead to the concrete. Her legs twisted unnaturally. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, then shut again. Mama, please wake up, Anna begged, kneeling and shaking her mother's shoulder with all the strength in her little hands. Her backpack, decorated with faded unicorn stickers, lay tossed nearby. A sandwich wrapped in foil had spilled out untouched, forgotten. People moved around them. A few glanced. One person muttered, "Someone should call someone," then kept walking. A delivery driver on a bike slowed down, stared for a second, then sped off, headphones in. "Help us," Anna screamed again. "Somebody." Then a voice, low and firm, cut through the chaos. "Step back, sweetheart. I've got her." Anna spun around. A tall man, broad-shouldered, dressed in a worn gray hoodie and jeans, was already kneeling beside Leticia. His face was mostly hidden beneath a ball cap pulled low. But there was something about his movements sharp, controlled, trained. "Is she gonna die?" Anna whispered, her bottom lip trembling. "No," he said, glancing at her. "Not if we move fast." He gently eased Leticia's head back, placed his folded hoodie beneath it, and began checking her pulse and airway. "What's your name?" he asked without looking away from her mother. "Anna." "Well, Anna, I need you to take 3 steps back. Can you do that for me?" She hesitated, then obeyed. Her knees shook. She said she was fine. "We just needed eggs." The man didn't answer. He was already on the phone with 911, his voice clipped and steady. "This is Donovan Reeds, female victim, unconscious, possible head trauma, broken arm, loss of blood, intersection of Crenshaw and 59th. Send EMS immediately." Anna didn't catch the name, didn't understand the weight it carried, but she saw how fast the ambulance came after that call. While they waited, Donovan took off his belt and used it as a tourniquet around Leticia's thigh, where the bone pressed visibly against the skin. His hands worked fast but calm, every move confident. "She's breathing, Anna. That's good, but we need the paramedics now." "She takes care of me," Anna murmured. "She works all day. I told her the chain was loose on the bike, but we didn't have time to fix it." Donovan looked at the child dirt on her cheeks, eyes too old for her age. "You're brave, Anna. Braver than most adults I've seen today." Just then, a woman in yoga pants walked by and snapped a photo with her phone. Donovan's eyes flickered. He said nothing, but shifted slightly to block the shot. The paramedics arrived in a roar of sirens and urgency. One of them stepped out, recognized Donovan, and paused. "Wait, are you?" "No time for that." Donovan cut him off. "Get her stabilized. Head trauma, broken left arm, likely internal injuries. She's going into shock." The EMT nodded and sprang into action. Anna watched as her mother was lifted onto the stretcher. As they began to roll her toward the ambulance, Anna lunged forward, grabbing Donovan's leg. "Please come with us," she pleaded. He crouched down beside her. "I can't go in the ambulance. But I'll see you again, I promise." People break promises. "I won't." She searched his eyes, then slowly let go. 30 minutes later, Donovan sat alone in his Tesla. Parked behind an alley 2 blocks from the hospital, he stared at the blood on his hands. Not metaphorical blood, the real kind. The kind that wouldn't come off with a single wipe. The kind he knew all too well from a past life. The dashboard pinged missed call from Tokyo, 2 urgent texts from his board, and a news alert. He ignored them all. Susan Miller's name popped up next. He answered. "You didn't show for the quarterly review," she said, half calm, half panicked. "I know. What happened?" "A 6-year-old asked the world to help, and nobody did, so I did." Silence. Susan spoke carefully. "Did they recognize you?" "A couple cameras were out. I wasn't exactly anonymous." "You want me to get ahead of it? Press statement?" "Number nothing. Don't spin it. Another pause. Donovan, why now? He leaned back, staring up at the cracked ceiling of the car. Because I saw a little girl kneeling in blood. And it reminded me of someone I failed a long time ago. This time, I didn't walk away. Susan said nothing more. She knew better than to push. Back at St. Mary's, Anna sat on a cracked vinyl chair outside the emergency ward. Her feet didn't touch the floor. Her fingers clutched her mother's lucky scarf, a faded green one that Letitia always wore on hard days. The nurses were busy. The television on the wall played an ad about car insurance. Nobody talked to her. She stared at the double doors that had swallowed her mother, waiting for anything to tell her this wasn't the end. And in the deepest corner of her little heart, she clung to a promise from a man she didn't know, who showed up when everyone else turned away. I won't break it, she whispered to herself. I know he won't. If you felt for Anna and her mom, hit like to show you're with them, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Who knows? Someone near you might be watching too. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. Donovan Reeds never liked hospitals. Not since he was 14, sitting alone in a sterile hallway as his mother slipped away behind swinging white doors. That memory still clung to him like an old scar, one that hadn't healed right, just buried deeper under decades of success, silence, and stone-faced discipline. He hadn't planned on stepping foot near St. Mary's Hospital that day, much less walking back through its emergency entrance. But an hour after leaving Anna and her mother, he found himself returning, hoodie back on, hands shoved deep into his pockets. He didn't know why. Maybe it was Anna's voice echoing in his head, small, furious, pleading. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, that awful mix of trust and trauma no 6-year-old should ever wear. Or maybe it was because when you once watched your own mother die alone, you couldn't stomach seeing it happen to someone else's. Inside, the air was colder than he remembered. The walls were painted a sterile gray, the kind of color meant to be calming but only made everything feel more lifeless. He kept his head down as he passed nurses and orderlies, moving like a ghost. At the far end of the hallway, he saw her Anna curled up on a plastic chair, legs tucked under her, holding the same faded scarf he'd seen before. Her eyes were red but dry now, wide open, staring at the double doors of the trauma unit like if she blinked, she might miss something vital. Donovan hesitated. He knew he should leave. He wasn't her father, wasn't her relative, wasn't anyone with a name she even knew. Just a man in a hoodie who showed up when no one else did. But then she looked up and saw him. Anna stood immediately, the scarf falling from her lap. You came back. Donovan gave a small nod. I said I would. Mo. She walked up to him slowly, like she wasn't sure if he was real. Then, without a word, she took his hand. They stood like that for a minute. He didn't know what to say, and she didn't seem to need words. Just someone solid beside her. How is she? He finally asked. Anna shrugged. The doctor said she's still sleeping. He used a lot of big words. I think it means they don't know. Donovan crouched down so he was eye level with her. Do you have anyone else here? Family? She shook her head. It's just us. Me and Mom. She says we're a team. Donovan's jaw clenched. He looked around, then motioned to the front desk. Wait here. He walked up to the nurse on duty, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a badge that read Lorraine. I'm here with Letitia Johnson, he said. She was brought in after a hit and run. Lorraine glanced at the computer. Are you family? No, he said, then paused. But I'd like to make sure her daughter isn't alone. Lorraine studied him carefully. She looked like the kind of woman who'd seen everything twice and still trusted her gut more than protocol. You're the man from the intersection, aren't you? Donovan didn't answer. She leaned closer. People around here are talking. That little girl says you saved her mama's life. That true? I was just there when no one else was, he said quietly. Lorraine tapped a few keys. Well, she's in the trauma unit, still unconscious, no family on record. CPS will likely get involved by tomorrow if nothing changes. Child Protective Services? Donovan asked, his voice dropping. Yes, sir. Standard for minors without guardians present. They'll put her in temporary care until the mother's stable or someone steps up. He looked back at Anna, who was now sitting with her hands folded in her lap. trying to look braver than she felt. "I'll stay," he said, "at least until someone official shows up." Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "You know this isn't going to stay quiet, right? Someone already recognized you." "I'm not here to be quiet," Donovan said. "I'm here because that kid shouldn't be alone." The nurse nodded. "Well, in that case, Mr. Reeds, you might want to go say hello to Dr. Patel. He's leading her care." Donovan found Dr. Patel reviewing charts outside the trauma wing. A young man, mid-32nd, sharp-eyed and fast-talking. "She's stable for now," the doctor said after introductions. "But there's a lot of trauma, fractured humerus, 2 broken ribs, possible internal bleeding. We've got her under observation. The CT scan showed a mild subdural hematoma. We're monitoring closely." "Will she recover?" Donovan asked. "If the swelling stays controlled, yes. She's strong." Donovan nodded. "She'll need help when she wakes up." Patel gave him a long look. "Are you a relative?" "Number Mize. Then why are you here?" Donovan hesitated. "Because someone has to be." That night, Donovan sat in the waiting room, across from Anna. He'd bought her a juice box and a peanut butter sandwich from the vending machine. She ate quietly, legs swinging off the chair. "Do you always help strangers?" she asked between bites. "No," he replied truthfully, "not always." She looked at him. "Then why us?" He paused, then said, "Because you asked. And because once, I needed help and no one answered." Anna nodded like she understood. A nurse peeked in. "She's awake. Your mom's asking for you." Anna's face lit up, and she rushed to the door. Donovan stood but didn't follow. He watched as the door closed behind her. His chest tight. He turned to leave. He'd done his part. Then he heard it. "Wait," Anna called, her small voice urgent. "Don't go yet." And somehow, he didn't. Donovan froze mid-step. Anna's voice echoed behind him, small but commanding, filled with the kind of desperation no adult could ignore, especially not one carrying the weight of too many regrets. He turned slowly, catching sight of her at the doorway, one hand holding the frame, the other reaching toward him. "She wants to see you," Anna said, her eyes wide, shining with a mixture of hope and fear. She said, "Is he still here?" Donovan hesitated. The hallway stretched long behind him, offering an easy escape. He could vanish into the night, leave this family to the system, let the hospital and the city do what they always did. But he remembered Anna's face in the street. He remembered the blood, and worse, he remembered walking away once before, when his own mother called out from a hospital bed and he never turned back. So this time, he turned around. Letitia Johnson lay weakly on the hospital bed, tubes running from her arm, her skin pale beneath the bruises, but her eyes were open, alert, searching. "Mom," Anna whispered, running to her side. She grasped her hand gently, careful not to disturb the wires. Letitia blinked at her daughter, then looked past her to the man standing just inside the door. "You came back," she said, voice hoarse. "I said I would," Donovan replied quietly. Letitia tried to sit up, winced. "You stayed with her. You didn't have to." "No, I didn't," he said honestly. "But you did." Donovan nodded. Letitia studied him. "You're someone important, aren't you?" He half smiled. "Not today." The room was quiet for a beat, only the soft beep of the heart monitor breaking the silence. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "If you hadn't been there, you don't have to thank me. But I want to. People like you. They don't usually stop for people like us." Donovan looked at her. "Then maybe it's time that changed." Letitia nodded, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "I just kept thinking, what if I died right there on that street, and no one even noticed? What would have happened to Anna?" Donovan glanced at the girl, now sitting on the edge of the bed, holding her mother's hand tightly. "She would have fought for you." "She already did." Letitia gave her daughter a shaky smile. "She's all I've got." That hit Donovan deeper than he expected. He swallowed hard. "I should let you rest," he said, turning to go. "Wet," Letitia said quickly. "Mr. Reeds, is it?" He paused at the door. "Are you going to disappear now?" Donovan didn't answer at first. Then, "Would you want me to stay involved?" Letitia gave a tired, wry smile. I don't even know what that means. Neither do I, he admitted. But Anna's not just any kid. She's something. Letitia nodded. She always has been. There was another pause, a kind of quiet that felt like understanding. Donovan looked at Anna. If you ever need me again, ask. I'll come. Anna's face lit up. That's a big promise, Letitia said, voice wary but not unkind. I don't make promises I don't mean, he replied. When he left the hospital that night, it was nearly 2 a.m. The streets of LA had quieted, the sirens distant, the buzz of the city muted by the late hour, but inside Donovan's chest, something had started humming. A voice he hadn't heard in years. A sense that maybe, just maybe, his life had taken a turn he hadn't planned, but couldn't avoid. The next morning, headlines exploded. Tense video goes viral. Mystery man saves woman. In hit and run incident. Is that Donovan Reed's under that hoodie? Billionaire stops to help black family in street reel or stunt. Photos surfaced grainy, from phones, but recognizable. Donovan bending over Letitia, Anna standing nearby. A bystander had filmed the entire incident from a coffee shop window. Now the internet was on fire. At his penthouse office downtown, Susan Miller dropped the newspaper on his desk. You made the front page. Donovan skimmed the article without emotion. They're calling you a hero, she added, crossing her arms, and also questioning your motives. He tossed the paper aside. Let them. Do you want me to issue a statement? Number. She paused. Donovan, this doesn't just blow over. You know that. I didn't do it for them. Susan sighed. You never do. He leaned back in his chair, eyes closed. Get me a meeting with someone at the hospital. I want full details on Letitia's condition, insurance status, care plan, quietly. You planning to pay for everything? No, he said. I'm planning to make sure she doesn't get left behind again. Susan raised an eyebrow. This isn't like you. He opened his eyes. It's exactly like me. It's just the part of me I buried a long time ago. Later that day, Donovan returned to St. Mary's. This time, he came in through the front. No hoodie, no disguise. People recognized him. Phones lifted. He ignored them. Letitia was awake, sitting up, a little stronger. Anna was drawing on the table beside her bed, big pink hearts and stick figures holding hands. Back again? Letitia said with a smile. Didn't want to break my promise. Anna beamed. I told her you'd come. Donovan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folder. I spoke with the hospital. Your treatment's covered. No press. No names. Just care. Letitia blinked. I didn't ask for. I know. But why? He looked her in the eye. Because people like you shouldn't have to beg to live. And because kids like Anna should grow up believing help comes when you call for it. Letitia's lips trembled. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything yet, he said gently. Just focus on getting better. Anna stood up and walked to him, clutching a crayon drawing. She handed it to him proudly. This is us. You, me, and Mommy. I made your head a little big, 'cause you think a lot. He chuckled. Fair enough. She looked up at him. Are you gonna stay in our story? He knelt to meet her eyes. That depends. You want me to? She nodded, serious. You're already in it. You can't leave in the middle. He took the drawing carefully, as if it were made of gold. Then I guess I'm staying. 3 days later, the hospital's beige walls began to feel less like a trap and more like a quiet sanctuary for Letitia Johnson and her daughter. With her arm in a cast and stitches along her temple, Letitia still moved slowly, but her spirit had started to return. The nurses said she was healing faster than expected. They didn't know it was the girl's laughter and the quiet presence of a man in tailored clothes that sped up her recovery more than any medicine. Donovan kept showing up. He never stayed long, never made a scene. He brought books for Anna, puzzles. Even some fresh clothes for Letitia, simple things, chosen with quiet dignity. And he never let the attention get to him, because attention had arrived, in waves. It started with a few news vans parked outside St. Mary's. hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious billionaire who'd helped a working-class black mother and her daughter. Then came the social media posts, edited clips, opinion pieces, reaction videos. Some praised him. Others questioned his motives. In a cafe downtown, two women in their 50s watched a grainy video on a tablet. He could have just kept walking, one said, sipping her coffee. I think what he did was good, the other woman frowned. Or calculated. Men like him don't sneeze without a strategy. Across the city, in a boardroom filled with sharp suits and sharper tongues, the board of Reed's Tech whispered about optics. He's making personal decisions that affect the brand, said one gray-haired man. Or human decisions that remind people we're still human, said another. But Donovan ignored all of it. He was focused on Anna and Leticia. Late Thursday afternoon, he walked into room 207 again. Anna looked up from the floor where she'd been building a miniature castle with foam blocks. You're late, Donovan smiled. Traffic. Leticia, seated upright with a newspaper folded in her lap, gestured to the page. Did you know there's an op-ed about you titled The Hoodie and the Hero Complex? Charming, Donovan muttered, sitting in the chair by the window. They think you're trying to rehab your image. He gave a shrug. If I cared about image, I'd be at a gala, not folding socks for a 6-year-old who thinks I think too much. Anna giglet. Leticia studied him. Why do you keep coming? Donovan looked at her directly. Because people like me don't show up often enough for people like you. And because it feels right. Leticia didn't argue. She just nodded slowly. Well, for what it's worth, it's helping. Just then, a nurse knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, she said. There's a visitor downstairs asking for Miss Johnson. Says he's family. Leticia's brow furrowed. Family? Donovan stood. Want me to check it out? She hesitated. Please. Donovan walked briskly down to the reception desk. There stood a tall man in his early 50s, dressed in construction boots, jeans, and a flannel shirt. His posture was stiff, his jaw clenched. You here for Leticia Johnson? Donovan asked. The man nodded. Name's Raymond. I'm her brother. Donovan studied him. She didn't mention a brother. Raymond's face tightened. We haven't spoken in a while. Not since. Well, family stuff. But I heard about the accident. I saw her on the news. Now you're here? She's my sister, Raymond snapped. I have every right. Donovan didn't flinch. She's upstairs. Stable. Her daughter's with her. Raymond softened. How's the girl? She's tough. Raymond sighed. Just like her mama. Donovan nodded. Come on. But if she tells me she doesn't want you here, you're leaving. Raymond didn't argue. Back in the room, Anna watched curiously as the tall man stepped in. Leticia stiffened. Ray? She said, disbelief in her voice. Hey, Tish. They stared at each other in silence for a moment. Then Leticia looked away. Now you show up? I messed up. Raymond said softly. But I'm here now. Leticia swallowed hard. It's been 10 years. I know. Anna looked between them, unsure. Donovan stepped back toward the hallway, giving them space. Outside, he leaned against the wall, arms crossed. For once, he wasn't in control of the room. He wasn't the fixer. Inside, Leticia's voice cracked. I needed you when Mama died. When I had Anna. When I lost my job. Where were you? I was lost, Raymond admitted. Drinking. Running. Trying not to be like our father. That's not good enough. I know, he said again. But I came now. And I want to help. Even if you scream at me every day. Even if you never forgive me. I want to be there for Anna, too. Leticia stared at him, and the silence stretched. Then finally, you sit down and tell her a story. She's been scared. And don't you dare lie to her. Raymond smiled gently. No lies. Just the good kind of stories. That night, Donovan stood in the hospital parking lot, looking up at the lights of the pediatric wing. Anna was safe. Leticia had her brother back. The media hadn't found them inside yet. but something in his chest itched. A memory. A voice from long ago. You run when things get too close. You fix everything, then vanish. One day, you're going to need someone to stay. Maybe that day had come. Or maybe he wasn't done here yet. As he got in his car, his phone buzzed with a message from Susan. Media, outside reads tech. Do you want me to prepare a formal statement about the hospital visits? He typed back, number, prepare something else. Quiet scholarships, for single mothers. Start with St. Mary's. Susan replied, on it. You're not walking away from this, are you? He looked at the hospital one last time. Not this time. He replied. Not her. The first morning Letitia was allowed to leave her hospital bed. The nurse rolled in a wheelchair and said with a smile, time to get a little sunshine. Letitia, still sore and weak, didn't feel much like sunshine. But Anna was already bouncing on her toes, eager to push the wheelchair herself. They made their way to the small rooftop garden on the 4th floor, a quiet space filled with potted plants and a view of the city skyline. Donovan was already there, standing by the railing with a coffee in one hand and a newspaper in the other. He looked up and smiled gently. Anna waved. We're up. Doctor says she's doing super good. That's great news, Donovan said, setting the cup down on a bench. He moved to help, but Anna was insistent. I got it. I'm strong. Letitia gave him a look, half amused, half grateful. You created a little powerhouse here. He smirked. I just answered when she called. They sat together, Donovan on the bench, Letitia in the chair, Anna on the ground playing with a small pinwheel someone had left in one of the planter boxes. For a moment, it was quiet, peaceful. But the peace didn't last. Letitia cleared her throat. Raymond told me what you said to him. Donovan raised an eyebrow. Which part? The part about protecting us, making sure we weren't alone. He said you meant it. I did. Letitia looked down at her lap. I'm not used to people meaning it. My. He nodded. I know. She looked back up, her voice lower. You don't have to keep coming back, Donovan. I don't want you to feel like you owe us something. He met her gaze. I don't feel obligated. I feel responsible. Because you saved my life? Number, because I saw what nobody else saw. A child standing in traffic screaming for help and everyone turned their face. Everyone but me. Letitia's voice cracked. That's how it's always been. I know, he said again gently. That's the problem. Anna, still playing, called out. Donovan, can we get tacos again today like last time? Letitia blinked. You bought her tacos? Only 3, he said with mock seriousness. She ordered me. Anna grinned. And I ate them all. Letitia chuckled softly. The sound fragile but real. You're spoiling her. She deserves it. Letitia's face grew serious again. So do you. Donovan looked out at the city. I've had everything and still felt empty. But this feels like something that matters. Just then, his phone buzzed. A text from Susan. LA Weekly running a piece tonight. Interview with someone from Letitia's old job. They're digging. Letitia noticed the change in his expression. Something wrong? He hesitated. Do you mind if I ask where you worked before all this? She stiffened. Why? Because the press is circling. I can shut it down if I know what's coming. Letitia looked away. I worked at a bank. Teller. 7 years. And? They let me go 2 months ago. Said I was late too many times. But that wasn't the truth. Donovan waited. I reported something. She said, voice trembling. A manager was giving out loans to people under false identities. Friends. Family. I told my supervisor. Then suddenly, I was always late. Always underperforming. I couldn't prove anything. I was just gone. Donovan's jaw tensed. You were punished for speaking up. I was erased, she said bitterly. Donovan stood. Then we're going to unerase you. Letitia stared at him. What? He looked at her, firm. You were right to report it. And if they're going to throw dirt, I'm going to make sure the world sees who threw it first. I don't need a crusade. You need protection, he interrupted. Anna needs a stable life. That means no reporters banging on your door. No whispers about your name. I can't undo the past, Letitia. But I can damn well make sure your future isn't defined by their lies. Ugh. She sat silent for a long moment. Then, okay, if you're sure. I've never been more. Later that day, Donovan met with Susan at his downtown office. She was already pulling up files. The bank is dodging questions, she said. We traced 3 of the fraudulent loans. You want me to leak it to the press? No, he said. Not yet. First, call a lawyer. Quiet but sharp. Letitia needs a case. Susan nodded. You're building a wall around them. I'm building a future. Back at the hospital, Raymond returned with groceries and coloring books. He looked at Letitia. Eyes soft. You good? She nodded. Better than I've been in a long time. Anna sat in bed drawing a picture. When Raymond asked what it was, she said, It's our new house. With a garden. And Donovan has a chair there too. Letitia watched her daughter carefully, then looked out the window. A new beginning was unfolding, not loud, not flashy, but real. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it might last. The sunlight over Los Angeles was harsh that morning, too bright, too revealing. Donovan stood in the parking lot of the modest courthouse in Inglewood, wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most used cars. But somehow it didn't make him feel powerful today. It felt like armor. Next to him, Letitia adjusted the collar of her simple navy blouse. Her left arm was still in a sling, but her posture was straight, her chin lifted. She hadn't spoken much in the car ride over, but her eyes, those fierce, brown eyes, told Donovan she was ready. You don't have to do this, he said quietly, as if offering her one last off-ramp. Letitia turned to him. Yes, I do. They stepped inside together. It wasn't a court hearing yet. It was a preliminary meeting with the legal team Donovan had hired, a pair of clean-cut attorneys named Karen Hill and Elijah Ford, both former public defenders who now worked quietly behind the scenes for people who couldn't afford justice. Donovan had pulled strings, called in favors, made it clear this was personal. Letitia sat across from them in a quiet room just off the record's wing. Anna, seated beside her, colored with crayons on a clipboard while the adults talked. You reported it in good faith, Karen said, tapping her tablet. You documented the dates, the names, even emailed your supervisor. It's more than most whistleblowers manage before getting shut out. They still fired me, Letitia said. Elijah nodded. They'll say it was performance-related. They always do. But this, he turned the screen to show an internal HR report. This contradicts their claims. Someone leaked this anonymously this morning. You were ranked in the top 10% of tellers for customer satisfaction, until exactly 1 week after your complaint. Letitia blinked. That's my handwriting on the review. They said that form was lost. Karen leaned in. Now it's found. Donovan stayed quiet, watching Letitia absorb each fact like someone learning the floor beneath her feet had always been unstable. We're not going to trial yet, Elijah said. First, we go to the press, carefully, controlled. We expose the bank's pattern: wrongful termination, targeted silencing. Then we let them come to us with a settlement. Letitia narrowed her eyes. And what happens when they deny everything? Karen gave a tight smile. Then we remind them who's standing beside you. Her eyes flicked to Donovan. He met Letitia's gaze. I won't let them bury you. Later that evening, back at the hospital, Letitia rested while Anna played in the small children's lounge down the hall. Donovan sat beside her hospital bed, the room filled with the steady hum of medical machines and soft jazz from the portable radio he'd brought. Letitia turned her head toward him. Can I ask you something personal? He nodded. You've been helping us, without asking for anything. Why? He considered for a moment. When I was 12, I saw my mother get evicted. The landlord didn't care that she was sick, or that we had nowhere to go. Nobody helped. People looked away. Letitia listened, eyes fixed on his. I swore if I ever had power, I'd use it differently. But somewhere along the way, I got too busy. Too cold. Then Anna's voice cut through everything. Please help my mom." Like she was shouting at the whole world, Letitia reached over and touched his hand gently. "And you answered." "I had to." The next morning, the story broke. Mother fired after exposing bank fraud protected by billionaire, hoodie hero. The headline spread fast. It wasn't on gossip blogs or tabloids. It was in the LA Times, with verified sources, court documents, and a sharp editorial line about justice for working-class women of color. The bank issued a statement calling the allegations misleading and under review. But the damage was done. The whistleblower had a name now. And a face. Donovan's. He didn't hide. He walked into Reed's Tech's next board meeting, laid down a proposal for a legal aid fund for whistleblowers and single mothers, and told the board he was shifting $10 million in discretionary spending to seed it. One executive protested. "This isn't the company's mission." Donovan stared him down. "Then maybe our mission's too small." Back at the hospital, Letitia's room became quieter again. Fewer nurses peeked in. The cameras outside had moved on to newer scandals. But something had shifted. People smiled at her more. They said her name with respect. Even Raymond, who had stayed every night on a cot near the nurses' station, seemed lighter. Anna handed Donovan a new drawing that evening. "This is you, but I gave you wings. Like a helper angel." Donovan chuckled. "I've been called worse." Letitia, sitting up now without the sling, asked softly, "And what happens next?" Donovan looked at her. Then at Anna. "That depends. Do you want me to still be part of what's next?" Letitia didn't answer right away. Then she smiled. "I think this is only the beginning." It was the first time in weeks that Letitia stepped outside the hospital without a nurse at her side or a wheelchair waiting nearby. She took each step slowly, but with intention, her left arm still a bit stiff from the fracture. The late afternoon sun soaked the sidewalk in gold. Donovan walked beside her, quietly matching her pace. "You sure you're up for this?" he asked. Letitia nodded. "I need to feel the air, smell real life again. Hospitals smell like bleach and forgotten hope." Donovan gave a soft laugh. Not the most glowing Yelp review. They reached the small courtyard near the visitor parking lot where Anna and Raymond waited under the shade of a jacaranda tree. Anna was sprawled on a blanket with her coloring book, humming a song she had invented. Raymond was leaning against a bench, arms crossed but relaxed, watching his niece with quiet warmth. Letitia smiled at the sight. "I almost forgot how peaceful she can be. She used to be such a worrier. Always watching me. Asking if I was okay. That's not a 6-year-old's job." Donovan glanced at her. "She doesn't seem like she carries that weight now." "That's you," Letitia said plainly. He didn't respond, just kept walking with her until they reached the others. Raymond stood. "Look at you, walking like a boss." Letitia smirked. "You doubted me?" "Never," he lied, then handed her a water bottle. "Thought you might need this." She sat carefully on the bench, wincing slightly, then looked at Donovan. "So what's next, Mr. Plan?" "Everything?" Donovan sat across from her. "What's next is options. You've got them now. With the press backing off and your case-building strength, you don't have to hide. You could apply for jobs again or, if you wanted, I know people in nonprofit circles. Advocacy work. Places where your voice matters." Letitia raised an eyebrow. "You offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a platform," he said. "The choice is yours." She looked away, as if afraid to let hope rise too quickly. "I've never had choices before. I've always just survived." "Well, surviving got you this far," Donovan replied. "Maybe now it's time you started building." Anna chimed in from the blanket. "Can we build a treehouse? With stairs and snacks inside?" Everyone laughed. Raymond reached into his jacket pocket. "Actually, speaking of building, I've been working construction again. Got hired on a site in South LA. The boss is nice. Asked if I knew anyone who could help with bookkeeping, said they're behind on it." Letitia's eyes widened. "Bookkeeping? I know it's not a career launch, but it's something. And I told him you're the best with numbers I've ever met." Letitia blinked, caught off guard. You really said that? Raymond nodded. You got fired for doing the right thing. Maybe it's time that gets rewarded. Donovan watched quietly as Letitia processed the offer. There was something about this moment, something sacred. A black woman being offered a lifeline not out of pity, but out of recognition, out of family. She nodded slowly. Okay. Tell him I'm interested. Anna clapped. Yay, Mom gets a new job. Later that evening, Donovan drove back through the city alone. Traffic buzzed around him, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He stopped at a red light near Florence Avenue and looked out his window. A mural covered the side of a nearby building, an image of a black mother holding her child, her eyes lifted to the sky. Underneath it read, "She held the world even as it broke her." Donovan leaned back in his seat. He thought of his own mother again, of the nights she worked double shifts, of the food she skipped so he could eat, of the pain she buried so deeply that no one could see it until it swallowed her. Letitia reminded him of her. The same quiet resilience, the same fire in the eyes. And now, finally, a flicker of possibility. When he returned to his apartment, Susan was already waiting in the lobby, holding a tablet and wearing that look that said she'd been arguing with someone for hours. Hey, he greeted. You didn't have to come all the way here. She raised an eyebrow. You weren't answering texts. I was breathing. Scary concept. They went upstairs, and she laid out the updates. The whistleblower case was gaining traction. 2 former employees from the bank had anonymously reached out with similar stories, and several nonprofits had expressed interest in interviewing Letitia for speaking engagements. You turned one act of kindness into a campaign for justice, Susan said. You do realize this could become a movement. Donovan poured a glass of water. That's not the point. No, she agreed. But it might be the result. He looked at her. Is that a bad thing? Susan sighed, sitting on the armrest of his couch. It's not. But you should be ready. The more light you bring, the more shadows you attract. Donovan nodded. Then I'll keep the lights on. She watched him for a moment. You've changed. He didn't deny it. She added, I like the old you, but I think I respect this one more. The next day, Donovan brought Anna and Letitia back to the same courtyard. This time, there was a small picnic laid out. Nothing extravagant, just sandwiches, fruit, juice. But it felt like a celebration. Letitia sat back, soaking in the sun. You know, I used to think people like you lived in glass towers, untouchable, unreachable. Donovan smiled. I did. Anna reached over and took his hand. Not anymore. And in that moment, with the laughter of a child, the quiet strength of a mother, and the soft pulse of justice beginning to beat again, Donovan realized something simple and true. He had finally come home. The following week arrived not with drama or headlines, but with something far more unsettling: stillness. The press had gone quiet, the bank issued no more statements, and even the usual swirl of gossip blogs had turned to fresher scandals. It was as if the world had moved on, but Donovan knew better. Silence, in his experience, was never neutral. It either meant retreat or recalibration, and corporate America rarely retreated. That morning, he sat alone in his downtown office, staring at a manila folder on his desk. Inside were background checks, legal memos, and confidential whistleblower reports, all compiled by his private investigators. The contents confirmed what Letitia had claimed, and added more details darker than she ever knew. The bank hadn't just fired her unjustly. It had covered up at least 4 internal reports of racial discrimination and financial manipulation. There were names. High-level names. Donovan tapped a finger on the desk, considering his next move. Exposing them outright would cause shockwaves, lawsuits, resignations, maybe even criminal indictments. But the cost would be high. Letitia's quiet return to normal life could be torn apart. Anna's peace could be shattered by cameras and microphones again. Just then, Susan entered without knocking, phone in one hand and a black coffee in the other. You look like you're about to declare war, she said dryly. Maybe I am. She handed him the coffee. Then you'll need this. He gestured to the folder. They've been doing it for years. Letitia was just the loudest pebble in a landslide they've been trying to bury. Susan glanced at the documents. You want to go public? Donovan hesitated. Not yet. But I need leverage. Something they can't ignore. Susan smirked. You're not looking for justice, Donovan. You're playing chess. He looked at her evenly. Justice and chess aren't that different. You just have to know when to sacrifice the queen. Meanwhile, across the city, Leticia was getting used to walking into rooms with her head high. She had accepted Raymond's connection at the construction firm, just a bookkeeping job. Part-time, but it paid fair, and came with something she hadn't felt in years. Dignity. She still hadn't told Anna the full story. How close they'd come to disaster. How, for a while, Leticia wasn't sure she'd wake up again, much less walk freely. But she'd decided to wait, not because she wanted to shield her daughter from truth, but because she wanted to first teach her what it looked like when truth triumphed. That evening, Donovan came to pick them up for dinner. Not a fancy restaurant or a gala fundraiser, just a corner diner in Baldwin Hills. Pancakes, burgers, jukebox tunes humming in the background. Leticia sipped her coffee. You know, it's funny. This place used to scare me. Donovan raised an eyebrow. The diner? Number. The quiet. The idea of not constantly fighting to survive. Of actually sitting down and enjoying eggs that I didn't cook on a busted burner at 6 a.m. Anna, across the table, looked up. Are you scared now? Leticia smiled. No, baby. I think I'm healing. Donovan nodded, absorbing her words. He looked down at his phone. Susan had just sent a one-line message. We found the weak link. Former VP. He's willing to talk. He pocketed the phone and turned back to them. Leticia. He began carefully. What if I told you we could end this? Not just your case, but the whole system that allowed it to happen. Would you want that? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Depends. What does end this mean? There's a man, an executive. He was part of the cover-up, but he's ready to testify. If he goes public, everything unravels. Leticia's hand curled around her mug. And what happens to him? Donovan shrugged. His career ends. Maybe worse. And me? You become the reason change happened. Your story becomes more than just survival, it becomes a catalyst. Leticia exhaled. I didn't ask for that kind of power. No, Donovan agreed. But sometimes power finds the people strong enough to carry it. Anna reached out and touched her mother's hand. You're my hero. Leticia looked at her daughter and then at Donovan. Okay, she said softly. If we do this, we do it together. On my terms. Donovan smiled. Always. The next day, they met in a secure office building, just outside the city center. The former VP of Compliance, a thin, nervous man named Miles Warren, arrived flanked by 2 attorneys. He looked like a man already living with one foot in exile. He barely met Leticia's eyes as they sat down. I remember your report, he said after a long pause. You wrote it clearly. Factually. You were brave. Leticia's voice was steady. And you ignored it. Miles flinched. I was told not to act. The directive came from above. Then why talk now? Donovan asked. Miles swallowed. Because it's eating me alive. Because my daughter asked me why I can't sleep at night. Silence followed. Not angry, not accusatory, just weighty. Miles pulled out a USB drive. Everything's on here. Emails, reports, meeting minutes. They can't spin this once it's out. Donovan reached for the drive, but Leticia placed her hand over his. She looked at Miles. What do you want in return? Immunity. And silence. My name stays out of the headlines. Leticia considered. Don. Back in Donovan's office, Susan worked fast. Press kits were prepared. Legal backup readied. The story was ready to drop within 24 hours. That night, Donovan stood alone on the rooftop of his building, watching the city glitter below. For the first time, he didn't feel above it all. He felt part of it. Leticia's words echoed in his mind. I think I'm healing. So was he, and with every step forward, they were reshaping a system that never expected them to survive, let alone win. It began with a ping, then a buzz, then a sudden, Sharp ring from a landline phone that hadn't been touched in years. Donovan's office, typically a place of hushed voices and measured conversations, lit up like a switchboard in a crisis center. Susan was already at the center of it all, headset on, tapping furiously at her laptop. CNN wants a comment. NPR is requesting a long-form sit-down. Someone from The Atlantic just sent a bouquet of ethically sourced flowers. Donovan, it's everywhere. Donovan stood at the window, looking down at the streaming news ticker on the LED strip across the building opposite. The words flashed in bold red. Bank exec blows whistle fraud, racism, and retaliation exposed. Whistleblower was right all along. He turned calm but focused. Where's Letitia? She's on her way here, Susan replied. With Anna and Raymond. Security prepped? Discreet but present. No cameras get past the lobby. He nodded, then checked his watch. And the files? Susan tapped a thumb drive on the desk. Already uploaded. All 219 pages. You were right, it's worse than we thought. They didn't just retaliate against Leticia. There was a whole culture built around silencing people who looked like her. Donovan sighed. Then it's time they got heard. 30 minutes later, Letitia stepped out of the elevator onto the executive floor with Anna holding her hand and Raymond following close behind. She wore a simple blazer over a gray blouse. No makeup, no dramatic entrance. Just presence solid, steady, unshakable. Anna immediately ran over to Donovan and threw her arms around his waist. I saw you on Mommy's phone. You're famous now. Donovan smiled and tousled her hair. I think your mom's more famous than me. Letitia looked around the office, noticing the buzzing staff, the silent TVs, the tension that hung even among allies. Feels like a storm's coming. Donovan nodded. We are the storm. They moved into the main conference room where Susan had prepared a live stream setup. One camera, one microphone, and Letitia at the head of the table. No PR spin, no staged lighting. Just her story. Are you ready for this? Susan asked. Leticia paused. Then she looked at her daughter, who sat in a chair quietly coloring the corner of a handout titled Statement of Integrity. I was born ready. I just didn't know it. The red light on the camera blinked on. Letitia took a deep breath, then began. My name is Letitia Harris. I'm a mother, a worker, and a woman who believes in doing the right thing even when it costs everything. The video lasted 9 minutes. In that time, she explained what happened at the bank. How she'd raised concerns, how the system ignored her and retaliated. She didn't cry, she didn't yell. She spoke with clarity and quiet defiance. The kind that makes people listen not out of sympathy, but out of respect. By the time the video ended, the views had crossed 250,000. By the next hour, it was over 1 million. Later that evening, Donovan and Leticia watched the coverage from his living room. Anna had fallen asleep, curled up on the couch, her head resting on a soft throw pillow shaped like a unicorn. Leticia stared at the screen. They're calling me brave. You are. She shook her head. Number I was scared every single day. I still am. Donovan turned toward her. That's what makes it brave. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to speak anyway. She looked at him, eyes softening. Why do you believe in me so much? He hesitated. Because you remind me of my mother. Because you make me want to be the man I was supposed to be. Silence stretched between them, heavy but warm. Then her phone buzzed. A message. From someone she hadn't heard from in months. I saw the video. I'm proud of you. We all are. Janelle. Letitia smiled to herself. She hadn't realized how much she'd needed those words. Across town, chaos brewed in the bank's executive offices. The boardroom was a frenzy. Legal counsel shouting over PR reps, phones ringing off the hook, news vans were already outside. The CEO, a silver-haired man who'd spent his career navigating crises, sat with his hands steepled beneath his chin. This is a wildfire, he muttered. We underestimated her. One advisor replied. We underestimated her and Donovan Reed. At that, the CEO scowled. That man was supposed to be untouchable, apolitical. A business mogul, not a crusader. And now he's both, the advisor said. That night, Donovan received a call from his father. They hadn't spoken in months, maybe years. I saw the news, his father said, voice scratchy with age. Didn't think you had it in you. Donovan leaned against the railing on his balcony. Neither did I. There was a long pause. I'm proud of you, son. Those 5 words hit harder than any headline. After the call ended, Donovan went back inside and found Letitia still awake, watching her daughter sleep. Everything's changing, she said softly. He nodded. And not just out there, she added, placing a hand over her heart. In here, too. For once, neither of them had to say what came next. Because now, it was clear. This wasn't just a personal fight, it was a public reckoning. One woman's truth had cracked open a door, and a whole nation was starting to peer inside. The morning after Letitia's video reached 2 million views, Raymond stood at the corner of 52nd and Western, waiting for the crosswalk light to change. The sky was blue and quiet, but he felt the tension in his bones. He wasn't a man who enjoyed attention. His world had always been about staying out of trouble, staying invisible. But that morning, 3 people had already stopped him. One offered a handshake, another a thank you, and the third simply said, "Tell your sister she's a hero." Raymond crossed the street and ducked into the small community center where he'd been volunteering off hours. Inside, a group of older men played dominoes while a local high school student arranged donation boxes in the back. As Raymond entered, a woman behind the desk, Miss Cheryl, looked up with a warm grin. Well, she said, tapping her glasses up. "If it ain't the brother of the woman who's turning this city upside down." Raymond chuckled. "You act like she's some kind of movie star." "She's better than that," Cheryl replied. "Movie stars play heroes. Your sister? She is one." Later that day, Donovan stood on a small stage at the Reeds Tech Foundation's quarterly charity summit. The room was packed philanthropists, educators, tech leaders. But the air had shifted. They weren't just there to cut checks and network anymore. They were watching Donovan, waiting to see what he'd say. He looked out at the crowd, then toward Letitia, who stood at the side, her arms crossed but her posture firm. Anna sat beside Susan in the front row, swinging her legs and occasionally sneaking gummy bears out of a hidden Ziploc bag. Donovan cleared his throat and stepped up to the microphone. Sometimes, change doesn't come from policies or profits. Sometimes, it comes from a single voice, tired but unyielding, afraid but unshakable. He paused. A woman walked into a bank to do her job. She left it unemployed, injured, and unheard. Until now. He gestured toward Letitia. "This foundation is pledging $5 million to launch a new initiative, the Harris Project. It will provide legal support, housing assistance, and job training for women who faced retaliation for speaking truth to power." The room erupted in applause, but Donovan's eyes stayed on Letitia. She looked surprised, touched, a little overwhelmed, but not broken. After the summit, they stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the city skyline. Letitia exhaled slowly. "You didn't have to name it after me." "Yes, I did," Donovan said. "You gave people a reason to care again." She looked down at the city. "I don't feel like a symbol. I still feel like a woman trying to figure out how to afford groceries next week." He nodded. "That's why you're the right person for it." Elsewhere in the city, backlash was simmering. News networks had begun running segments not just praising Letitia, but questioning the bank's long history of silence. Stockholders were panicking. Board members were resigning quietly, one by one. And in some circles, darker whispers began to emerge, accusations that Letitia's story was overblown, that Donovan was grandstanding for PR. Donovan received a message that evening, anonymous, but clear. "Back off, or she pays again." He didn't show it to Letitia. Instead, he called Susan. "I want every security measure in place," he said. "And pull background checks on all current bank board members, discreetly." Susan didn't hesitate, already on it. The next few days blurred into a flurry of meetings, interviews, and tense silence. But in the midst of it, Letitia and Anna found peace in small routines again. Breakfast with real eggs and pancakes, evening walks, bedtime stories without fear. Then, one morning, the doorbell rang. Raymond answered, expecting a package. Instead, a young woman stood there, early 30s, neat but tired looking, holding a file folder tight to her chest. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said softly. "My name's Brianna. I used to work at the same bank." Letitia appeared behind Raymond. "You're the one who emailed me." Brianna nodded. "I saw your video, and I realized, if you can survive that storm, maybe I can tell the truth too." They sat around the kitchen table while Anna played in the next room. Brianna opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, policy memos, and internal reports. She'd been in a compliance role, like Miles Warren, but lower down. She'd seen patterns, files disappearing, complaints edited or deleted entirely. She'd even been asked to lose a folder once that included Letitia's name. "I didn't," she said. "I kept copies, and now I want to help." Letitia looked at her. "Are you ready for what that means?" "No," Brianna admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." Now, that night, Donovan sat on the couch, flipping through Brianna's documents. His jaw clenched tighter with each page. "This isn't just negligence," he said. "This is orchestrated cover-up." Letitia nodded. "So what do we do now?" Donovan looked at her. "We go further. We stop playing defense." Letitia didn't blink. "Then let's go all the way." For the first time, it wasn't about saving her name. It was about saving everyone else who'd been too afraid to speak until now. Letitia wasn't a symbol anymore. She was a force, a reckoning, and this time, no one would silence her. Letitia stood in front of the mirror in Donovan's guest bathroom, adjusting the collar of her navy blue blouse. It wasn't just any day. She was scheduled to testify this time not in a courtroom, but at a city council hearing. Her story had reached so far that the city of Los Angeles had called a public session to discuss the discriminatory practices exposed by her case. Her voice, once ignored, had become a call to action. But it wasn't the cameras or the officials that made her palms sweat. It was the people, regular folks who would be sitting in those chairs, expecting her to speak for them, too. Donovan appeared at the doorway, holding a folder in one hand. "You ready?" he asked, his tone gentle. Letitia turned, took a breath, and nodded. "As I'll ever be." "Raymond's already got Anna. Susan's at the council chamber setting up. You'll have a full support team there." He walked up and handed her the folder. "And Brianna's statement, in case you want to reference it." Letitia took the folder, looked down at the printed words, then looked back up. "This is more than I ever imagined. A few months ago, I was begging strangers to help my daughter." He met her eyes. "Now strangers are begging you to help them." The hearing chamber buzzed with activity. Press crews lined the back. Community leaders, activists, and average citizens filled the rows. Letitia sat behind the panel table, flanked by Susan on her left and Brianna on her right. Donovan stood near the rear of the room, hands in his pockets, watching the proceedings unfold. A city councilman cleared his throat and tapped the mic. "We are gathered here today not for spectacle, but for substance. Miss Letitia Harris, we are grateful for your presence and your courage. You may proceed." Letitia stood. Her voice did not tremble. "My name is Letitia Harris. I am not a politician. I am not a lawyer. I'm a single mother, a former bank employee, and I was fired, injured, and humiliated because I asked why my clients were being treated differently for the color of their skin." She paused, letting the silence hold. "I didn't ask to be the face of anything. But when I looked at my daughter lying on a hospital bed, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. And when I see all of you here, I realize none of us can." Applause rippled across the room, but Letitia continued, her tone steady. "What happened to me wasn't an accident. It was a system. One that said people like me don't matter. One that said our complaints are noise, our dignity expendable. I'm here to say no more." Brianna followed with her own testimony, her voice more reserved but equally powerful. She detailed the internal culture at the bank, the passive tolerance of racism, the active cover-ups. By the end, several council members had tears in their eyes. When the hearing ended, Letitia stepped into the lobby only to be greeted by a wall of applause. The community had shown up. Elders from her neighborhood, church members, teachers, workers, People who'd never spoken on camera before but who now lifted their phones to say, "That's our story too." Outside, the cameras swarmed, but Donovan guided her past them into the safety of a waiting car. Once inside, Letitia exhaled deeply. "Is it always like this?" she asked, voice tired but content. Donovan smiled. "Not always. But when it counts." Yeah. Later that evening, the atmosphere at Donovan's home was lighter. Raymond cooked dinner, his famous lemon pepper chicken wings, while Anna played with a dollhouse on the floor. Brianna, still overwhelmed by the attention she'd received, sat at the kitchen counter sipping ginger ale. "You handled that mic like a pro," Raymond said to Letitia as he placed a plate in front of her. Letitia chuckled. "Thanks. I kept thinking if I could survive high school debates, I could survive a city council hearing." Anna looked up. "Mom, are you famous now?" Letitia knelt beside her. "No, baby. I'm just louder than I used to be." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Donovan stood out on the balcony, sipping coffee and scrolling through the flood of messages on his phone: thank you notes, media requests, even calls from federal agencies interested in investigating the bank further. Susan called. "You won today," she said, "but they're regrouping." "I know," he replied. "They always do. We've got intel that a PR firm was hired by the bank. Smear tactics, fake reports. They're going to try to make Letitia look like an opportunist." Donovan's face hardened. "Then we stay ahead. We don't let her stand alone." The next morning, the smear campaign began. A tabloid headline screamed, "Bank whistleblower has history of conflict. Says former co-workers." Anonymous source, half-truths, twisted quotes. Letitia saw the article while making breakfast and froze. "They're trying to make me look crazy," she whispered. Anna looked up. "Mom?" Letitia forced a smile. "It's okay, baby. Just grown-up stuff." Donovan arrived minutes later. He'd seen the piece, too. "I have our lawyers drafting a cease and desist," he said. "We'll counter every word." Letitia closed the laptop. "Number? Let them talk." Donovan blinked. "What?" She looked at him, her voice steady. "They want me to retreat. To disappear. But I'm not going to hide. Let them talk. I'll keep showing up." Donovan studied her, how much she'd changed, how much she'd endured. Then he nodded. "Okay, then we fight on your terms." And with that, the next chapter of the battle began, not in courtrooms or newsrooms, but in the hearts and minds of everyday people. Watching closely, listening carefully, and slowly beginning to rise. The morning fog had barely lifted over South Los Angeles when Raymond's phone rang. He was on the back porch watering the small herb garden he'd grown for his mother years ago, still tending it in her memory. The call came from a blocked number. Instinct told him to let it go to voicemail. Something deeper told him to pick up. "Raymond Harris," he answered. A raspy voice crackled through the line. "You think your sister's safe? You think this ends with her speeches and your fancy lawyer friends? Be careful what you dig up. Some things should stay buried." Click. Raymond stared at the phone for a long moment, then slowly turned the water hose off. He didn't tell Letitia, not yet. She had enough weight on her shoulders. But later that afternoon, when they all gathered at Donovan's to prepare for the next press event, Raymond pulled Donovan aside. "She's being watched," Raymond said. "Maybe we all are." Donovan nodded grimly. "We've been one step ahead, but it's time we double that." He called Susan, who within an hour had a digital forensics team sweeping their phones, emails, even their home Wi-Fi networks. She also hired 2 former FBI agents to monitor any physical threats. Susan didn't believe in luck. She believed in preparedness. Meanwhile, Letitia met with a journalist from a reputable outlet who'd been quietly investigating the bank for over a year. His name was Marcus Lee, a former Pulitzer nominee who looked more like a history professor than a firebrand reporter. His eyes lit with sharp intensity as he sat across from Letitia in a cafe near Crenshaw. "You're not the first," he said softly, "but you might be the last straw." He slid a small flash drive across the table. "This is everything I've gathered. Internal memos, off-the-record interviews, financial leaks. With your testimony and Brianna's documents, this will be airtight." Letitia held the drive in her hand like it was made of glass. Why haven't you published it? Marcus shrugged. Needed a catalyst. Someone brave enough to stand in front of the storm. Letitia met his gaze. Well, you've got one now. The next day, the firestorm began. The exposé went live on every major platform, headlined simply, "The Cost of Silence. How a Bank Bought Loyalty and Buried the Truth." It was accompanied by a video montage. Letitia's city council speech, testimonies from former employees, internal footage of company meetings. It hit like a thunderclap. Social media exploded. Politicians began demanding a federal investigation. Civil rights attorneys filed class action lawsuits. Several corporate sponsors pulled their investments from the bank. One by one, the dominoes started to fall. But so did the threats. Donovan's car was keyed outside his gated community. Brianna received a dead rat left at her doorstep. Letitia's apartment was egged twice in one night. Yet none of them backed down. Instead, they moved forward. That week, Letitia was invited to appear on 60 Minutes. She hesitated at first. It felt surreal, this small voice now projected across millions of living rooms. But Raymond urged her on. "You didn't ask for this, sis," he told her, "but it asked for you." The interview was taped inside a modest church where Letitia used to volunteer. She sat on a simple wooden chair in front of stained glass windows, sunlight casting gentle hues across her face. The interviewer, a calm, measured woman in her 50s, asked, "What made you come forward, despite everything you stood to lose?" Letitia paused, then answered, "Because I couldn't stand the thought of my daughter growing up in a world where silence is safer than truth." It was the quote that defined the piece. The following morning, Letitia woke up to find dozens of notes slipped under her door, handwritten letters, cards, and drawings. One stood out. A crayon sketch from a child named Mariah in Detroit. It showed a woman with a superhero cape standing in front of a bank. Beneath it, scrawled in purple ink, "You are my real Wonder Woman." Letitia sat on the floor, holding the picture in both hands, tears running silently down her cheeks. But the moment of peace didn't last long. That evening, Susan burst into Donovan's office, tablet in hand. "We've got a problem." She turned the screen toward him. A new report had surfaced, anonymous sources claiming Letitia had mismanaged bank funds during her employment. It was a smear piece, full of vague allegations. But it had already been picked up by multiple outlets. Donovan's jaw clenched. "It's coordinated. They're desperate." Susan nodded. "We can refute it. But if they're digging this deep, they're going to go lower." Donovan called Letitia immediately. She listened quietly, not panicked, just tired. "I can take it," she said. "They don't scare me anymore." "I know," Donovan replied, "but you won't take it alone." That night, they held a meeting at Donovan's. Brianna, Raymond, Susan, Marcus, and two new whistleblowers who'd come forward, both young black men who'd worked in IT and compliance, both with damning emails and records. They gathered around the dining table, laptops open, voices overlapping. "We don't wait anymore," Letitia said. "We go on offense." Donovan looked around the table, this group of ordinary people who had become something extraordinary. "A coalition. You want war," he said quietly. "You'll get it, but it's going to be on our terms." Letitia nodded. "And it starts now." Across the city, in a dark paneled room filled with lawyers and board members, the bank's CEO watched Letitia's latest interview replay on the screen. "She's not backing down," one advisor said. The CEO's eyes narrowed. "Then we burn her credibility to the ground." But even he didn't realize. The fire they feared was already beyond control. It was no longer about Letitia alone. It was a movement, a reckoning, and it wasn't going out. It started with a phone call at dawn. Marcus Lee. Voice low but urgent. "Check the leak. It's happening." Donovan rubbed his eyes and rolled over in bed, tapping his tablet. On screen, a new video had surfaced, an internal meeting recording from the bank, time-stamped 6 months before Letitia was fired. The footage showed senior executives discussing containment strategies for employee dissent, including using internal audits and HR channels as tools of intimidation. Get rid of them before they think they've got leverage, one VP had said casually, sipping coffee. Donovan sat upright, breath held. This wasn't a leak, it was an explosion. By 9 a.m., the video had gone viral. By noon, Congress had issued a statement urging the Justice Department to investigate not just the bank, but its ties to other financial institutions. Letitia's name was now more than trending, it was being spoken on the Senate floor. But she didn't celebrate. Instead, she sat in Anna's room, braiding her daughter's hair while cartoons played in the background. Anna chattered on about a school art project, oblivious to the storm her mother had helped unleash. Raymond entered quietly and leaned against the doorframe. "You should see the news," he said. Letitia didn't look up. "I'm scared, Ray." He frowned. "Of what?" "We're winning. That's what scares me. The closer we get, the more dangerous they'll become." Raymond crossed the room and knelt beside her. "You didn't start this for headlines. You started it for her." He nodded toward Anna, who smiled and waved at him mid-braid. Letitia finally smiled back. "Yeah, I did." Across the city, the bank's headquarters had transformed into a fortress. Protesters gathered outside with signs reading, "Justice for Letitia," and "We are not silent." A massive mural had appeared overnight on a nearby wall, Letitia, painted larger than life, with a blindfolded Lady Justice behind her. The artist had signed it with one word: truth. Inside the boardroom, chaos brewed. "This is untenable," one director barked. "We've got a class action, federal heat, and 2 more whistleblowers coming forward." The CEO stood silently at the head of the table, staring at the paused frame of the leaked video. "Find the leak," he said through clenched teeth. "I want names." But it was too late. The ripples had already broken the dam. Letitia's legal team, with Donovan's backing, launched a formal petition to reopen all dismissed discrimination cases tied to the bank within the last 5 years. Hundreds of emails flooded in. Former employees, customers, contractors, each one with a story, each one now refusing to stay quiet. That week, Letitia and Donovan were invited to a town hall hosted by the Southern Justice Initiative, a civil rights watchdog group. The auditorium filled to capacity, hundreds inside, hundreds more watching online. Letitia stood on the stage, microphone in hand. A single spotlight on her. She began quietly. "I'm not a politician. I don't speak in slogans. She scanned the audience. "I'm just a woman who wanted to do her job with dignity. And when that dignity was stolen, I decided to fight." The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. "This isn't about me anymore. This is about every person who's been silenced, overlooked, and punished for daring to believe they matter. If they thought they could bury us with shame, they forgot one thing." She paused. "We are the roots, and roots grow in silence, in the dark. But when they break through," she smiled, voice rising, "they tear concrete." The crowd erupted in applause, chants of "no more silence," echoing through the night. Backstage, Donovan stood with Susan, arms crossed, watching Letitia with a kind of awe he rarely allowed himself. "She's not just surviving," Susan said quietly. "She's leading." Donovan nodded. "And we follow." But even as the movement gained strength, shadows still loomed. Late that night, while Letitia and Anna slept, Raymond stepped outside to grab a package from the porch. He froze. A car idled at the end of the block, headlights off, engine low. The windows were tinted black. It lingered for a beat too long before slowly pulling away. Raymond watched it until it turned the corner. The next morning, Donovan tightened security again. Unmarked vehicles with rotating schedules, plainclothes protection near Anna's school, and private surveillance at Letitia's apartment. Susan also initiated a digital monitoring protocol. Any unusual web activity related to Letitia would ping an alert. Letitia protested. "I don't want to live in fear," Donovan replied. "You're not living in fear. You're living in truth. The fear belongs to them now." Meanwhile, Marcus Lee published a follow-up piece, "The Whistle Echoes: How One Woman's Voice Became a Movement." The story tracked Letitia's journey, highlighting each step not as a stroke of luck, but as a testament to perseverance. It ended with a single quote from her 60 Minutes interview. "I couldn't stand the thought of my daughter growing up in a world where silence is safer than truth." Across the nation, people shared it. Some printed it, others framed it, and in one elementary school in New Jersey, a teacher read the quote aloud to her class. A little girl raised her hand. "Miss, what does truth mean?" The teacher smiled gently. "It means not hiding who you are, even when it's hard." By the end of that week, the bank's CEO was subpoenaed. Multiple executives resigned. Stockholders demanded a complete audit, and the Department of Justice confirmed that a full-scale investigation was underway. Letitia stood in Donovan's office, holding Anna's hand, watching the news unfold on the big screen. "You did this," Donovan said. "No," Letitia replied, her voice soft but firm. "We did." Anna looked up, confused. "Does this mean it's over?" Letitia knelt beside her. "No, sweetie. It means it's starting. Because real justice, like roots, starts in the dark. But it doesn't stop growing until it breaks the surface." The morning air felt oddly still. Letitia sat at the edge of her bed, arms wrapped around her knees, the television flashing muted images of protests outside the bank's Los Angeles branch. Anna was still asleep, curled up under her frozen blanket, unaware of the world outside shifting like tectonic plates. Raymond knocked gently on the doorframe. "You've been up since 5. "I couldn't sleep," Letitia said without turning. "Every time I close my eyes, I wonder what they'll try next." Raymond walked in and sat beside her. "They're losing. That's why they're desperate." Letitia finally turned to look at him. "Desperate people don't play fair, Ray. They torch the game board." An hour later, Donovan paced his office, phone glued to his ear. Susan stood nearby, expression taut, her tablet showing live updates from every major news outlet. "They've issued a formal statement," Susan said. "The bank claims it has zero tolerance for discrimination and plans to launch an internal review. Classic damage control." "This." Donovan lowered the phone. "A review? They had years to clean house. Now they want to light incense and hope the smell covers the rot?" Susan crossed her arms. "They're trying to buy time. And sympathy," Donovan added. "But it won't work. Not after what we've uncovered." Just then, the office lights flickered. A second later, Susan's tablet screen glitched, then rebooted. "That's odd," she muttered. Seconds later, every device in the office pinged at once. Email alerts. System failures. One by one, screens went black. Donovan's assistant burst in. "Sir, our entire server just crashed." Donovan turned to Susan, alarmed. "Tell me that's not them." Susan's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling diagnostic data. "They hacked us," she confirmed. "Looks like a coordinated cyber attack. They want to bury the files." Donovan's jaw tightened. "Do we have backups?" "Encrypted off-site," Susan replied. "But if they got into our cloud, they could tamper with the chain of custody." Letitia arrived minutes later, having gotten Donovan's call. "They're going digital now?" she asked, incredulous. "Isn't that federal territory?" "It is," Donovan replied. "And we're reporting it. But we have to act faster. If we wait for the wheels of justice to turn, they'll erase every trail we've uncovered." Letitia looked down at her phone. Even it was acting strange, slow to respond, freezing randomly. "They want to make us doubt everything," she whispered. "Our words, our evidence, our memories." Donovan looked at her. "Then we do the one thing they don't expect." She raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" He smiled grimly. "We go analog." Within the next 48 hours, Susan and her team printed every critical file, stored them in secure locations, and mailed duplicates to multiple independent journalists. They physically delivered key documents to the Department of Justice and civil rights organizations. Letitia and Marcus recorded a video message from a secure studio, outlining the cyber attack and warning the public about the bank's new tactics. The video was uploaded to dozens of platforms, backed up across servers worldwide, and within hours, it was trending. Their silence wasn't enough, Letitia said in the video. Now, they're trying to erase the truth. But we don't run, and we don't forget. The pressure was mounting. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The DOJ assigned a special prosecutor. Civil rights groups called for boycotts. Yet amidst the growing public support, a darker undercurrent rose. Online bots flooded social media with disinformation campaigns. Photos of Letitia were doctored. Her credentials questioned. Videos were manipulated. A deepfake even surfaced, showing her allegedly accepting bribe money, a video later proven false, but not before it went viral. Anna came home from school one day, eyes brimming with confusion. "Mom, someone said you're going to jail." Letitia knelt beside her, heart aching. "That's not true, baby. Some people are scared of what I'm doing, so they try to scare others. But I promise, we're okay." Anna wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. "You're the bravest person I know." Letitia held her tight. "So are you." That night, Letitia couldn't sleep again. She stood by the window, watching the street below. Her thoughts tangled. The victories were real, but so were the costs. Her name, her face, her family, everything had become public property. She couldn't go to the grocery store without whispers. Couldn't step outside without a camera somewhere tracking her. Raymond joined her, holding 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "You're thinking about stopping," he said gently. Letitia didn't answer at first. Then, "I'm thinking about survival." He handed her a mug. "You remember what Mom used to say?" Letitia smiled faintly. "Survival's just the floor. You were made to rise higher." "She'd be proud of you," Raymond said. Letitia nodded slowly. "I hope she'd be proud of how I'm doing it." Across the city, in a private retreat far from the public eye, the bank's board met behind closed doors. The CEO slammed a folder onto the table. "The hacks failed. The smear campaign failed. She's bulletproof." One director, older and more measured, leaned back. "No one is bulletproof, but we underestimated her. We treated her like a nuisance. She's a symbol now." The CEO's eyes narrowed. "Then we burn the symbol." Back in Donovan's office the next morning, Susan read through a new batch of documents submitted by an anonymous former HR manager. The content was devastating proof that Letitia's dismissal had been premeditated, that higher-ups had signed off on retaliatory actions long before her complaint was officially filed. Letitia stared at the evidence. "This is the smoking gun." Donovan nodded. "It's time we force their hand." "What's the next move?" Raymond asked. Donovan looked up. "We hold a live press conference. No script, no spin, just truth. All of us, together." Letitia took a deep breath. It was more than just a fight now. It was the moment before the wave crested. One last push and the whole tide might turn. The press conference was set on the steps of City Hall, beneath a sky the color of steel. A makeshift stage had been erected overnight, lined with folding chairs and flanked by flags fluttering in the breeze. By noon, the crowd stretched down the block, students, pastors, veterans, single mothers, young professionals, and retirees alike. Some carried signs, others carried candles. All carried one thing in common: a shared fury, wrapped in fragile hope. Letitia stood behind the podium, flanked by Donovan, Raymond, Brianna, Susan, and Marcus. She wore a deep blue blazer, simple, elegant, and a gold pin shaped like a tree, given to her by Anna that morning. "Because you grow truth," her daughter had whispered. The murmur of the crowd faded as Letitia stepped forward. She placed her notes down but didn't read them. "I want to tell you a story," she began, voice steady. "About a bank. About a job. About a woman who was told that speaking up meant shutting up her dreams forever." A hush fell over the crowd. "I want to tell you how that woman, how I lost my job, my security, and nearly my sense of worth because I refused to look away while my people were mistreated. Because I believed that dignity doesn't have a price tag." She looked out at the faces watching her, some tearful, some defiant. "This is not about revenge. It's about responsibility. Today, we are releasing evidence that confirms systemic racism, coordinated retaliation, and deliberate manipulation of truth inside one of the most powerful banks in this country. And this isn't an isolated story. It's a mirror." Brianna stepped forward next. She read from internal memos, emails that confirmed Letitia's firing had been planned, that whistleblowers were marked as liabilities, that performance reviews were used as tools of coercion. Each document, projected onto large screens behind them, struck like a hammer. Then Marcus took the mic. "I've spent my life chasing truth. But even I underestimated the courage it takes to stand alone at first until you realize You never were alone. You were just waiting for the others to rise. Donovan followed, issuing a formal demand for a Department of Justice Special Commission. Susan laid out a new digital repository where anyone, from any bank, could safely submit testimony. Raymond spoke last, voice raw. You threatened my family. You tried to break my sister. And now the world sees you. When Letitia stepped back to the podium to close, her voice dropped almost to a whisper. To every black girl who's been told her silence is safer than her voice. I am here to tell you it isn't. It never was. Speak. And if your voice shakes, let it shake the ground. The silence that followed was heavy. Then someone in the crowd began to clap. Another joined. Then dozens. Then hundreds. The applause thundered through downtown, echoing between buildings like a heartbeat awakening a city. The following day, the headlines were relentless. Whistleblowers' evidence forces federal inquiry. Racial bias at the core of financial giant, documents show. Letitia Harris sparks nationwide reform movement. Congress moved swiftly. Subpoenas were issued. The bank's CEO was called to testify before a judiciary committee. Stockholders demanded mass resignations. Several board members stepped down within 72 hours. But the backlash came just as fast. Letitia's personal email was hacked, and private messages were leaked online. Blogs posted old photos, twisting them for narratives. Talking heads on late-night cable spun conspiracy theories, painting her as a political plant. Raymond's truck was keyed again, and someone left a dead crow on Susan's front porch. Letitia refused to respond to the noise. Instead, she held a community forum in a public library near her old neighborhood. No press, just people. She answered every question, hugged every hand that reached out, listened to every voice that had been waiting too long to speak. An elderly man in a worn veteran's cap stood during the Q&A. I lost my home in 2008 because of a bank just like that. Didn't think anyone would ever answer for it. Letitia met his eyes. They will now. And they won't forget your face again. That evening, she returned home to find Anna asleep on the couch, a drawing on her chest. It was of Letitia, standing on a stage, sunlight pouring around her, surrounded by stars. In big letters across the top, Anna had written, "My mommy is the light." Letitia sat down beside her and whispered, "And you're my sky." Meanwhile, at the bank's national headquarters, panic had become policy. The CEO had gone silent, hiding behind lawyers and PR teams. A leaked memo revealed internal fears of widespread customer withdrawals and regulatory collapse. But outside, momentum continued to swell. Other banks began announcing internal reviews. Financial news outlets hosted panels on institutional racism in corporate America. High school students organized walkouts in solidarity. Clergy preached about Letitia on Sunday morning. Artists painted murals of her alongside icons like Rosa Parks and Ida B. Wells. Donovan, overwhelmed by requests for interviews and collaborations, made one thing clear to every caller. This isn't a brand. It's a cause, and we're not selling it. One night, as the team gathered again in Donovan's home, Susan played a voicemail on speaker. It was from a former senior executive at the bank. "I can't stay quiet anymore," the woman said. "I have documents and names. I want to help her." The room went still. Letitia looked around at her circle, once strangers, now family, warriors. "She's coming forward," Letitia whispered. "That means others will, too." Raymond raised his glass of iced tea. "To truth. To justice," Brian added. Donovan met Letitia's eyes. "To the beginning of the end." Letitia smiled, eyes shining but firm. "No," she said, "to the beginning of something better." The next morning brought the storm. Not the metaphorical kind. An actual torrential downpour that darkened the Los Angeles sky and drenched the city in sheets of cold gray. But Letitia stood dry, wrapped in a black trench coat beneath the marble columns of the federal courthouse. The day had come. Inside, the room buzzed with nervous energy. Rows of seats were filled with reporters, attorneys, victims, supporters, and skeptics. On one side of the room sat representatives of the bank's executive board, flanked by a phalanx of corporate lawyers. On the other, Letitia and her legal team, Donovan, Susan, and a young attorney named Alan, fresh from Howard Law and fiercely intelligent. This was the preliminary hearing, the opening phase of what the media was calling the corporate reckoning, but it already felt bigger than any courtroom could hold. Letitia sat still, her fingers laced tightly in her lap. When the judge entered, a black woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness and fire, the room stood. Letitia felt a flicker of something rare. Trust. Let's proceed, the judge said, voice crisp. Miss Harris, you may give your opening statement. Letitia stood, the courtroom silent. Your Honor, she began, I did not come here today to tear down institutions. I came to shine a light on what happens when institutions forget their humanity. I was fired for telling the truth. And now, the truth demands to be heard. She spoke for only 5 minutes. But those minutes rang out like thunder. After her, Susan presented the timeline of events. Donovan introduced testimony from other whistleblowers. Alan laid out the legal arguments for systemic harm, citing labor law, civil rights violations, and whistleblower protection breaches. Across the aisle, the bank's attorneys countered with the usual weapons: doubt, distraction, deniability. They claimed Letitia's performance was poor, that her dismissal was routine, that no pattern existed. But every denial was met with evidence, a document, an email, a witness. By noon, the judge called a recess. Letitia stepped outside into the rain. The crowd parted as she walked. A woman in her 70s held up a sign that read, "Because of you, I told my truth too." Letitia paused and hugged her. "You're why I keep going," she said softly. Back inside, the courtroom reconvened. The bank's defense team attempted a bold move, requesting that all whistleblower testimonies be sealed, citing reputational risk and confidentiality. The judge leaned forward, skeptical. "Are you asking this court to silence the very people whose voices brought this case to light?" The lead attorney shifted uncomfortably. "We are simply concerned about prejudicing the public narrative." The judge cut him off. "Then perhaps your client should have considered that before firing people for speaking up." The request was denied. Later that day, a surprise witness was called, a former high-ranking compliance officer who had secretly documented dozens of internal memos encouraging silence and reward systems for employees who remained loyal to management. Her voice quivered as she testified, but her words were crystal clear. "They told us to protect the brand at all costs," she said. "Even if that meant breaking the law." Donovan leaned over to Letitia. "That might be the turning point." Letitia whispered back, "It better be." By day's end, the judge ruled in favor of moving forward with a full trial. The courtroom erupted not in cheers, but in tears and relief. It was a green light on a road paved with pain. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky broke open with soft gold light as if the city itself exhaled. That evening, back at Donovan's home, the group gathered again. Raymond grilled chicken in the backyard. Brianna played Uno with Anna. Susan sipped red wine while combing through more testimonies on her laptop. Letitia stood by the window, looking out over the garden. Donovan joined her, a plate in hand. "Eat," he said. She took it, smiling. "You know, I used to think I was just a cog in the machine. Now I feel like maybe I'm part of something that'll change how the machine runs." "You are," Donovan replied. "You lit a fuse." And they didn't see the blast coming. A knock interrupted them. It was Marcus, holding a USB drive and a grim expression. "I just got sent something," he said, "from an anonymous source. You need to see this." Everyone gathered in the living room as Marcus plugged the drive into Susan's laptop. On screen appeared a hidden camera video taken inside a closed-door meeting of the bank's crisis committee. The date: 2 weeks before Letitia was fired. The audio was clear. "Letitia Harris is a risk," a senior VP said. "She's too visible, too smart. If she goes public, we're exposed. We need to discredit her," another voice chimed in. "Dig up dirt, push her out quietly, make her emotional, then say she's unstable." A third voice: "If that doesn't work, we cut deeper, family, finances, whatever it takes. Gasps filled the room. Letitia sat frozen, her face drained of color. Susan's voice cracked. They planned all of it, every move. Raymond clenched his fists. They went after Anna. Donovan stood. We take this straight to the DOJ. This isn't just evidence, it's a confession. Letitia looked around the room, her allies, her family, her reason. They wanted to destroy me, she said. Instead, they built a fire. Marcus nodded. One they'll never be able to put out. Oh. Later that night, Letitia lay in bed with Anna sleeping beside her. The little girl stirred, then mumbled, "Mommy? Yes, baby. Did the bad people lose yet?" Letitia brushed hair from Anna's face. Not yet. But they will, because truth, once lit, doesn't flicker. It burns. The courthouse bell tolled midday, resonating deep in Letitia's chest as she left the courtroom steps. Rain began to fall soft, steady, cleansing rather than chilling. She had testified hours ago, laying bare everything, the plan to destroy her, the poison of expectations that people like her stayed quiet. And now, the city was listening. She boarded the civic bus home, scanning the faces around her. Some nodded with respect. Others whispered apologies. A young black woman offered her a proud smile. She thought of that woman as Letitia stepped off at her stop, umbrella in hand. Raindrops tracing lines of vitality down her coat. She descended those wet stairs slowly, each one a testament to a fight that refused to be silenced. At home, Anna ran up and wrapped her in a damp hug. "You did amazing," she said, voice muffled by Letitia's jacket. She bent down and whispered, "So did you." Raymond was setting dishes on the table. "You spoke with fire." Letitia closed her eyes for a moment and exhaled. "I just spoke the truth." Within the next 2 days, the ripple turned into a wave. National media picked up the story. CNN ran a segment comparing Letitia's fight to legendary whistleblowers like Eileen Foster, who exposed mortgage fraud during the financial crisis, and more recent cases involving banks under scrutiny. Commentary ranged from admiration to outrage. Banks everywhere braced for accountability. Meanwhile, the Senate Banking Committee quietly requested internal communications from multiple banks, citing the pattern Letitia exposed. For the first time, institutional structures seemed to bend toward reform, but the pressure also intensified. That night, Susan called Donovan. "They're going after her again," she said. "This time, it's not digital smear, it's footwork. Reporters staking out her home. Paparazzi near Anna's school." Donovan's jaw tightened. "Then we push back." They mounted a response through legal avenues and public statements, while also ensuring protection for their families. Yet, the fight began to infiltrate larger systems. At Reed's Tech's board meeting, Donovan proposed a new internal policy. Every whistleblower case, regardless of the dollar value involved, would receive institutional support and public transparency. It passed unanimously, a subtle but seismic shift, proof that systems could change. On Thursday, Letitia received a handwritten letter from a student at a Southern college. "You saved my internship. I found the courage to speak up against fraud in my firm. Thank you." She held it close, tears mixing with rain from windows open in the cramped apartment. Friday dawned with sunshine. At a local community college, a packed auditorium gathered for a symposium titled "Truth and Accountability." Letitia stepped on stage. The speaker before her, a young woman, introduced her with reverence. When Letitia Harris spoke on this very stage, she made everyone promise to be brave, even when scared. Letitia smiled gently, seats filled with faces she did not know but who carried traces of her fight in their eyes. She began speaking as she did before. No theatrics, just conviction. Change isn't lightning. It's a slow burn that takes root. And sometimes you have to be the spark. In the bank's executive circles, panic had metastasized into disarray. Leaked memos showed board members plotting damage control, but more quietly, some were preparing to resign. Media reported internal resignations. Congressional oversight loomed. Public outrage had become unignorable reality. On the weekend, Letitia attended a neighborhood barbecue organized by her community center. She laughed as Anna chased fireflies, unburdened and free. Donovan helped flip burgers. Raymond talked trade jobs with neighbors. Brianna, sitting under a tree, sketched new designs for the Hope Foundation garden they planned to build a community space funded by the Harris Project. As dusk fell, a man approached Letitia, face familiar. "I'm Miles Warren's neighbor," he said softly. He testified. "He paid a price. Just wanted you to know. He's proud." Letitia nodded. "So am I." Sunday came with peace no headline could replicate. They gathered around the living room again. Donovan and Susan on one couch. Letitia and Anna on another. Raymond perched below. Anna held up a crayon drawing. It was Letitia standing in front of towering waves, arms spread wide, with the caption, "Mom stopped the flood." Letitia kissed her forehead. Not alone. They all looked around at each other. A phone pinged with a notification. The DOJ had launched a formal investigation into the bank. Donovan exhaled. "It's not over." Letitia reached over and took his hand. "Number, it's just getting started." And in that gentle, unassuming living room, under the soft glow of evening lamps, the tremors of change rippled outward, quiet, unwavering, and deeply unstoppable. It was just past dawn when the letter arrived delivered by hand, in a crisp envelope bearing the seal of the U.S. Department of Justice. Letitia stood on her porch, bathrobe cinched tight, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from inside. She held the envelope like it was made of glass. The world had changed around her, but had it changed enough? Inside, Raymond stirred the eggs while Anna poured cereal, humming a tune from her school recital. The soft sounds of home, of normalcy. Letitia walked into the kitchen quietly, breaking the seal as her family watched. Her eyes scanned the page once, then again, and a third time, just to be sure. "They're moving forward," she said at last, voice steady but trembling. "The DOJ is filing federal charges against the bank. Full-scale prosecution. Civil and criminal." Raymond dropped the spatula. Anna's spoon clinked against her bowl. Susan, already seated at the kitchen counter, leaned forward. "They're actually doing it?" Letitia handed her the letter. "All of it. Racial discrimination, retaliation against whistleblowers, conspiracy to obstruct justice." Donovan, who had arrived just minutes earlier with fresh bagels, let out a low whistle. They must have realized this was bigger than reputational damage. It's a reckoning. Letitia sank into a chair. They finally heard us, but it wasn't relief that swept over her. It was responsibility. The weight of being the voice that cracked the silence, and now had to carry the echo forward. That afternoon, she returned to her old neighborhood, not for a speech, not for a protest, just to walk. She passed the grocery store, where she used to buy beans and rice on a tight budget, the bench where she'd once sat with Anna, exhausted after a double shift. The bus stop she stood at, rain soaking her shoes. The night she decided not to back down. A young man on a bike pulled up beside her. "You Letitia Harris?" She turned. "I am." He nodded. "I work security now. Got promoted. Used to be afraid to speak up when stuff wasn't right, but then I saw what you did." She smiled. "You did it too. You spoke." He nodded and rode away. But his words lingered. At Reed's Tech headquarters, Donovan called an emergency board meeting. He proposed a national partnership with community organizations to implement a program called Equity Watch, using AI and human oversight to identify patterns of discrimination in real time. It passed unanimously. The company pledged millions. But more importantly, it pledged transparency. Later that week, Letitia was invited to deliver the commencement address at Howard University. Standing at the podium, she took a deep breath before speaking. "Class of this year," she began, "you are walking into a world that's loud with injustice but louder still with potential." She paused. "When I was fired, I thought I lost my future. But I didn't. I just found its true direction. Not because I was brave all the time, but because I was scared and didn't let that stop me." She looked out across the sea of graduates in black caps and gowns. "Your voices matter. Your stories matter. And if you're ever told otherwise, Remember, change doesn't wait for permission. It waits for courage. The crowd rose in a standing ovation that rolled through the stadium like thunder. But not everything was celebratory. A week later, the trial began. Letitia didn't attend every day. Some wounds didn't need reopening. But she testified once more. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. When the verdict came, it was swift and unanimous. Guilty. Multiple executives were sentenced to prison. The bank was fined billions. More importantly, restitution funds were established for past employees who suffered under the policies Letitia had exposed. Her case became a benchmark in corporate law, taught in universities across the country. Still, the real change came quietly. It came when a receptionist at a government office asked for her ID, then whispered, "Thank you for helping my son keep his scholarship." It came when an elderly white woman in a grocery store squeezed her hand and said, "I didn't understand before. Now I do." It came when Anna brought home a school assignment titled, "Who's Your Hero?" and had written, in crooked handwriting, "My mom." Because she told the truth when it was hard. Letitia kept that paper in her wallet. The foundation she and Donovan started grew. The Harris Justice Initiative expanded to 3 states, then 7. They launched mentorship programs, legal aid clinics, even training programs for companies trying to unlearn bias. Raymond ran the logistics. Brianna taught courses. Susan oversaw the digital outreach. One day, while speaking to a group of interns, Letitia was asked what victory felt like. She paused, thoughtful. "Victory isn't a headline," she said. "It's a whisper you hear when the noise dies down. It's knowing you didn't stay silent. It's watching a kid like my Anna grow up in a world where people like me don't have to fight alone." And when the last intern left that day, she stayed back in the room a moment longer, staring out the window at the city that once ignored her and now listened. Years later, long after the last article had faded from the internet, long after the banks had changed leadership and policy, and the headlines moved on to other crises, Letitia stood at a community mural unveiling. It was of her, but she wasn't alone in the painting. There were children, workers, elders, people of every race and background standing together, eyes raised toward a single word painted above them all. Truth. Anna, now older, stood beside her. "You ready?" Letitia asked. Anna smiled. "I was born ready." And so they stood mother and daughter, warrior and witness, truth teller and dreamer as the sun poured down on the mural, and the city, once again, turned its face toward the light. The story of Letitia Harris teaches us that truth is not just an act of courage, it's a responsibility. In the face of injustice, silence serves the oppressor. Letitia's journey shows that one voice, when backed by integrity and resilience, can ignite systemic change. It reminds us that justice is not granted, but fought for, and that even the smallest act of standing up can ripple into a movement. Ultimately, it is a tribute to those who refuse to be silent, and a call for all of us to speak when it matters most.